And this I like. I want to tattoo this on my back, that there are certain mental capabilities that cannot be represented in the computer.
Hello, this is Felienne.
And this is Hanna.
And this is another episode of Computer Science, of course.
Computer science.
Of course. Computer science.
Of course.
This is Computer Science.
Of course.
Of course.
Hey, Hanna!
Hey, Felienne!
What would you say is a thing that computers still can't do?
I think they can't fix my Saturdays. Saturday is my cleaning day, cleaning the toilets, doing all the laundry, folding the laundry. I mean, probably there are some robots who can do it, but they are not in my house.
Yes,
And
I was going to say, I'm sure Silicon Valley will promise that those robots will be there soon.
Yes, and I think they can't taste the stuff they could cook. I mean, everyone in Germany has this machine that can cook for them. Some friends wanted to sell it to me.
So
like
what
this
is a machine
kitchen
that
machine.
can cook? Is this a microwave? I seriously don't.
No, it's this thing. It has a built-in iPad. And you pick a recipe, you put the stuff in, it cuts it, it heats it. I think it's just like a mixer that can heat up stuff.
Like a soup machine.
Yeah, like a soup machine, but it is a bit like more advanced. It can make brownies. But in any case, I mean, it can probably mix it, but it can't taste it. So what's good in that? A machine that can't taste.
Yes.
Computers can't taste cake yet, I guess. Sad,
Yes.
right?
So
I mean, imagine.
You might say that computers are not in a situation, which is also one of the quotes of the book that we're going to discuss today.
And which book is that?
It is called What Computers Can't Do. There's one edition, an early edition, and then there was a later edition in the 90s called What Computers Still Can't Do by Hubert Dreyfus.
Wonderful. Tell me more about what computers can't do or still can't do or still can't do.
It's such an interesting book because if you read it now in 2026, it is so right and so wrong at the same time. So you have to, of course, situate this book. It is in the AI winter. And he's consistently talking about how AI, the Marvin Minsky-like AI, how it has failed and it will never work. And only true believers are still trying this idea of getting computers to do artificial intelligence or actual human thinking. And in so many ways, he's very, very right. But also, of course, a lot of the things he's describing, computers can now do these things, or at least you might say they can mimic it in such a way that some people describe it as being able to do it.
Okay, so in some ways he was wrong. In which ways was he right?
Yeah, so let me pick a few quotes because there's so many nice ones. Yes, here I have it. So his idea is that the way that at this point AI is being constructed is symbolic AI. So this is the AI in which you put a lot of knowledge into the computer, and then from that knowledge, more knowledge is constructed. So this is really fundamentally different from how we understand AI now, but that's the AI program that was then being pursued. So he says, it turns out that, at least for the time being, a research program based on the assumption that human beings produce intelligence using facts and rules has reached a dead end, and there's no reason to think that it could ever succeed.
Yeah.
And I think this is true, that this did not succeed. It didn't really work out this way, that we could make AI by just putting a lot of rules in. And he has so many wonderful examples. He has one example about picking the right gift for an event. So you go to a birthday party of a Dutch friend, and maybe you are Dutch or you're not Dutch. Now, what gift do you bring? What is appropriate? And I love this example. He takes this from Bourdieu, that this depends on so many things. It depends on who is this person? What is your history? What did they give you last time? What did you observe other people giving at similar parties? It can be too expensive or too flashy, but it also cannot be too cheap. This is a very thin line that you have to navigate. And then he describes, let me pick up one other quote. So here, Dreyfus is quoting Bourdieu saying about gift giving. The active presence of past experiences deposited in each organism in the form of schemes of perception, thought, and action, tend to guarantee the correctness, between quotes, of practices and their consistency over time, more reliably than all formal rules and explicit norms.
Yes. Yeah.
And then Dreyfus contextualizes this and says that a mistake often made, not just by AI people, but also by anthropologists and philosophers, is that they think these rules can just be broken down into steps, and then this is how you decide. But of course, that isn't true. And then they also argue that you can do weird things, which sometimes are appropriate, and you can even create new traditions. Like if you make something handmade for everyone each year, then that becomes a tradition and people start expecting it of you. And then it becomes appropriate. So I thought, yes, this is such a lovely example. And also, it is so out of scope of what tech bros are now doing, right? No one is building a machine that can give gifts at a birthday party, while at the same time, you can ask ChatGPT this. And I'm sure it can come up with some reasonable examples of things you can give. I haven't tried, but things you can give Dutch people at their birthday party. So this is why it's such an interesting book. It is at the same time entirely correct and also so outdated that in a sense it's useless to read it. It is fun, but also very weird.
Yeah, I guess there's no one building a robot who gets a good present idea under the shower, which is where I get the good ideas. And it's definitely not by applying some rules. But I have to admit, I always bring backup presents. Yeah, if it turns out it's too small, I have another little present with me.
I'm intrigued by this. They open it and then you look at their like frown
Yes.
or smile. And then if they don't smile vibrantly, then you're like, oh, I have something more.
Yeah, if they're not happy enough. Yes. Yeah, it's a little bit ridiculous.
That's maybe what a robot would also do, right? Pick many different things so that you will always be correct.
Yes. So maybe, yeah, I have this rule that if they are not happy enough, give them another gift. But
and then where does it stop? Why do you bring just one backup gift? Why not 3?
My God, don't tempt me. No, but at least I get the ideas under the shower. That must count for something. Yeah. So the book is outdated, but it is also relevant. If you were to write the next version of the book, what should change?
Yeah, so he is hinting here and there at the difference between human intelligence and computer intelligence, but he doesn't really make that very clear. So he is describing all these things that humans can do. And then in his day and age, of course, he can just say, look, a computer is not able to do this. Haha, I win. I do think there's also a little bit of, is gleefulness the right word? Where he's like, ha, 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 my enemy is failing. It's quite clear that he doesn't like them people and that he's happy that their endeavor that they spent their life on is failing. And I get that. I totally understand. But it is very easy for him to point at things that aren't working. And therefore, not so much of the book is really devoted to this question of what is the difference? And are there inherent things that people can do that humans cannot do? Like I love your example of tasting food, right? But then everything I think we can think of, people that believe in AI in the current hype will say that a computer can do this. Oh, but this is just a spectrometer, I think. This is a device that you can just put stuff into and then it has all the molecules. That is tasting. They will just argue that is tasting. Then you can see how much garlic oil there is and how much tomato flavor. So now the computer has analyzed this and it can now make decisions based on this. So it is this consistent back and forth between what does it mean to be a human, and it doesn't really go very deeply into this philosophy. I think he could do this, like not now he's dead, but he could have done this. But for his argument that he was making then, it wasn't really necessary to make this argument because he could clearly just point at things that computers were failing at and say, ha ha, fail.
I love it.
Yes.
Yes. And you say there's so many good quotes. Just give us another highlight.
Let's do another one. Here, I have one maybe related to what we were just talking about. This is all the way at the end in the book, where he maybe does it a little bit, but still in a way that can be unpacked. Yeah, maybe this is a good example where you see that there's the beginning of a good argument, but because it's tied to the computers at that time, it doesn't really go forward. He says, the fact that AI hasn't really worked enables us to see the fundamental difference between human and machine intelligence. Artificial intelligence must begin at a level of objectivity and rationality, where the facts have already been produced. So first you must have the facts, and then you put them into the computer. It abstracts these facts from the situation in which they are organized and attempts to simulate intelligent behavior. But these facts are taken out of context and are an unwieldy mass of neural data with which the artificial intelligence worker thus far has been unable to cope. All programs so far bog down inexorably as the information files grow. So you see, in the beginning, he's like, it's just simulating intelligent behavior and you need all these facts. But at the end, his argument is, and this is also in other places in the book, you have to put in so many facts that the program gets really slow and then it crashes and then it fails. So this second part of the argument then was enough and now definitely would not be enough.
Yeah. And do you want to give it a try to fix it?
Yes, but the problem is then the core of the argument gets so different because the core of the argument can no longer be it doesn't work, right? Because these facts out of context, it doesn't really matter because ChatGPT and other LLMs, they can do this, right? You can ask it things about the physical world. One of my colleagues at VU was recently interviewed for a podcast, and he says, well, you can ask ChatGPT, can you stack eggs? And then it will just give an explanation of how eggs that are egg-shaped, if you put them on top of each other, they will topple over. How does it know, air quotes, this? It doesn't really know this, I would argue. But if you want to argue that a computer is now thinking and is also situated in the real world, then you can easily do so because you can point in an example and say, look, it is reasoning about the shape of eggs. And we never explicitly programmed into the machine, as they did in those days in the 70s and also in the 90s in the second version. They never said, this is the shape of an egg. This is the way of an egg. And the shell is very brittle. So if you stack it, they will break. We didn't put that information in explicitly in a set of facts.
Yeah. Maybe tell us a bit more. This was a philosophical book.
Yeah, Dreyfus is a philosopher.
Is it also interdisciplinary?
So, yes, you can definitely say it's interdisciplinary. He himself is a philosopher, even though he has, of course, he was at MIT himself for a while, and he clearly understands like how these systems are programmed. But by background, he is a philosopher. So him talking about the practices of AI definitely is interdisciplinary to a certain extent. You could almost even call it like ethnography. He is an outsider, but somehow, because he worked there and his brother was also there at MIT for a while, so he looks at this world intimately, but from the outside. So I'm not sure if you would call this interdisciplinary, but definitely in his arguments, he draws on philosophy really well. Man, he is a philosopher. And also he brings arguments, I think, to the table that would help the discussion of AI today, even though, as I said before, he doesn't really drive them home because he doesn't need to. For example, he's citing Plato here, and he says that Plato has a theory of human behavior. And he says, for Plato, a theory of human behavior which allows us to understand what a certain segment of behavior accomplishes is also an explanation of how that behavior is produced. So that's a lot to take in. But he's saying that, is there a meaningful difference between doing something and understanding how that came to be? And this also made me think a bit of your Alice and Bob homework from the last episode, where you say, well, is there a meaningful difference between playing that you love someone to get their money and actually loving someone, even though the outside behavior is the same? So the way Dreyfus explains this, Plato says that these things are the same. If you can observe someone's behavior, you also understand that it is an explanation of why that behavior came to be. But yeah, you may very well, I think, not believe this. And I think there lie the interesting questions that we would have to grapple with today. What does it mean for a computer to behave in a certain way? Can we ever get something out of that behavior to make decisions on if the thing is conscious or moral or whatever it could be?
Yeah, so I disagree with Plato. These discussions, are they taking place today in philosophy or in AI? Is this book still influential or has it faded out?
So I can't really speak for is it influential in philosophy, but of course, we being in a computer science world or around it at least, I had never heard of this book before. very recent. So I don't think it was very influential in computer science, in thinking about computers. I took an AI course when I was doing I think it was in my bachelor in computer science. This was very much the old time AI. It was called Knowledge Systems, the course, and it was about building these systems. But never in this course were people talking about, is this a thing we can even build? Can knowledge be built? So I don't think in computer science it ever really had a big impact, but maybe also because, well, there was the AI winter there. So to a certain extent, maybe it didn't matter at the time.
How did you encounter this book then, if it wasn't that influential? How come you know of it?
This is a great question, because I actually went to a philosopher in VU. So I went to this philosopher and I said, hey, I don't like computer science much anymore. I would very much like to study computer science as the practices of knowledge production in computer science. Can you help me? And then this philosopher, Jeroen de Ridder, he actually had a long list of things for me to read. And then he gave me this book. And I was like, this is very interesting. By the way, also, a quick Google while chatting with you reveals that there was a paper in 2024 called Can Computers Do Now? Dreyfus revisited for the third wave of AI.
Yeah.
So maybe you should read that as homework, and then next time
yes.
I will know the answer to how impactful was this paper in philosophy.
Yes, but I really still also would like to have a paper what computers still can't do.
Yes, I mean, you can write that paper.
Yes.
But I think it's really hard because, like, will we then, whoever writes this, are you then focusing on hallucinations? And there's all these nice, easy examples and the R's and strawberries, etc. That is an answer to what computers can do, for sure. And then another answer is it can't taste, it can't love, which is of a very different category, which is the category, I think, where you leave the part of computer science or human thinking where arguments and reasoning matter. In the hallucinations, you can still work in this normal framework of, well, but it's 5%. No, it's 7%. Oh, is 7% many hallucinations, right? Is this too much for practical purposes? There you can have this sort of debate that we are all used to in computer worlds. But then as soon as you go to, can a computer taste or love, you stop being able to use the normal forms of rhetoric that we normally use, presenting evidence, because then it does become, can a computer taste is a matter of taste. I would also like that as a paper title.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So maybe for me personally, it's more about what computers just don't do. I don't care if they can or can't. They are not doing it. They are not laying awake at night because they gave me bad advice. So I don't want advice from a thing that will not lay awake at night because it said something stupid to me. And maybe it could be programmed to keep ruminating, but it's not.
Yeah, so it doesn't have, maybe if I can rephrase this, it doesn't have accountability.
Yes.
If it tells you eat this mushroom because it's very tasty, and then, I don't know, you lose your liver over this, then you cannot call the AI and say, hey, this mushroom was poison. I don't like this.
Yeah, I see you looking at quotes. I think I can see it. Read it.
I have so many.
Give me the most surprising quote.
Ooh, that is a good one. That's a good question. Oh, yes. So I have a quote where Dreyfus is quoting John Searle. And Searle is known mainly for the Chinese room experiment. And this Chinese room experiment is the idea that he's also a philosopher, Searle, thinking of can computers think? And he's saying, well, if you lock someone in a room with all the Chinese dictionaries in the world and you have a Chinese conversation with them, then they will just look up the symbols that you send them and then answer in the symbols that are in the program. Can this person speak Chinese or read Chinese? Most people will say no, because they're just looking up rules. And then by extension, a computer also cannot think in Chinese or cannot think because they're just looking up stuff. So Dreyfus here is citing Searle and saying that there's so many ways of thinking, so many metaphors, he says, that are just working without an underlying principle of similarity. And he gives the example of if you would say about a friend, they're just like a block of ice. Then immediately you have an idea with this person. If I'm like, oh, I have a colleague, she's like ice. But then why, right? They aren't literally cold. They clearly are not made of ice, but there also isn't a property of ice you can point to that they actually have, right? If you say like they're like a puppy, then they're easily excited because a puppy is also easily excited. Then there's some sort of thing you can point to. But then the Searle is saying, it seems to just be a fact about our mental capacities that we are able to interpret certain sorts of metaphors without the application of any underlying rules or principles other than the sheer ability to make certain associations. I don't know any better way to describe these abilities than to say they are non-representational mental capabilities. They cannot be represented. And this I like. I want to tattoo this on my back, that there are certain mental capabilities that cannot be represented in the computer. And I know then, tring tring, hey, it is AI fans here, but Felienne, they can be represented because they exist in ChatGPT. No, right? They aren't really represented in there. Yes, if you feed it data, then it can come up with this pattern. But I like this so much. There's stuff we can do and we don't even know how to do it. And reading poetry with 100 people, maybe 80 people will have sort of the same interpretation, if it's not too weird of a poetry example. But then maybe 20 people will have different associations that are also beautiful and also useful, but they just interpret things in a different way. This, I think, was one of my favorites.
Yes, it would be a cool tattoo. Yeah, I think you should get it.
I'm too afraid to get a tattoo, otherwise I would have many already.
Yeah, what is another tattoo-worthy quote from this book?
Yeah, I have one that is somewhat similar, but still I think all these quotes really matter because, as this whole podcast endeavor is about, it's all the ways of thinking I was never exposed to as a computer science. The only way of thinking we're exposed to is, well, here's an algorithm and you have to make it super quick and then measure how quick it is or prove how quick it is. And I don't think until very, very recently I had the tools or the vocabulary to even describe that is just one way of looking at the world and that there are also other ways of looking at the world. So I think one reason that it's fun to read this book, because now part of it is just stick it to the tech bros. They're doing weird stuff and it's fun. It's nice to feel like you have an ally in a different time. But also so many quotes are dismantling the basic assumptions on which the whole of computer science and the whole of AI is resting. So here's one. There is, he says, an epistemological assumption that all knowledge can be formalized. That is, that whatever can be understood can be expressed in terms of logical relations, more exactly in terms of Boolean functions, the logical calculus which governs the way that bits are related according to rules.
Yeah, this assumption I think not many would agree with anymore. Or do you think this is still an assumption underlying current AI enthusiasm?
So that depends a bit on how you define formalized, right? I don't think a lot of people still believe that symbolic AI is the way to the future. Although, of course, people are now saying, well, large language models have hallucinations. We have some good old-fashioned AI that actually did not have any hallucinations. So the path forward is hybrid, and then we can have the vagueness of text models, but also the preciseness of symbolic AI. I am sure NWO or NSF or the EU is receiving many, many proposals of scientists doing this. So I don't think they mean necessarily formalized anymore in those terms, but you can rephrase it slightly, and I do think it still describes what we're doing now. You could say today we have an epistemological assumption that all knowledge can be simulated.
Yes.
I think if you just replace formalized with simulated, or exhibited or shown, then I do think this is something that people believe that are working on these systems now, that any knowledge that people have, whatever shape or form this has, can be done by a machine. And there's this somewhat famous Dutch computer scientist called Michiel Bakker. He's also at MIT, but he often writes for Dutch newspapers. And he's just saying any thinking can be done by computers because our brain is just a computer. We're just biological computers. So why cannot we simulate that? So I think that is almost this quote. It's just a matter of what technology you have underneath.
So he talks about Plato. Does he also talk about other philosophers we might know?
Yes, definitely. Probably also someone we don't know. But he has this very, very nice quote of Wittgenstein, which we also talked about in the Turing paper, because Turing does not talk about them. At least Dreyfus does him some justice. And this is, again, from this perspective of, can we formalize the entire world? Wittgenstein says, we are unable to clearly circumscribe the concepts that we use, not because we don't know their real definition, but because there is no real definition. To suppose that there must be would be like supposing that whenever children play with a ball, they play a game according to strict rules. This is very nice, that there's so many things that people do and they don't have exact rules. Like, I was thinking about dancing. I went to a dance party with my husband. We do like rock and roll dancing, and you can just go to a random Lindy Hop party. That's the dance that we do. And I can walk to a person and say, do you want to dance? I do this with people I do not know. And you can just dance with a random person, and they might be much better than you are. And usually they will just adjust their things they do to your level. They can be much worse, and then you adjust. And then this is a communication where in the first few steps you are feeling like, what is your level, but also what is your style of it's a leading and following dance. So is the leader very firm or very like soft and inviting? Is the follower easy to steer? But also, what are they wearing, right? What are the moves that would look nice on their body, on their clothes? This is this whole negotiation that happens 100% without words. And I was just saying to my husband, because even if it's my Sunday night off, I'm still thinking about AI. Like, I don't envision a world in which this would happen, where robots can just enter a space and they can negotiate with each other. And also all be so different. Like, some people are dressed in dresses. There was this one guy dressed in I think it was like a motor hat, black t-shirt and black pants. So he doesn't look like someone that goes to a party for swing dancing. And he still does like this whole assortment of people and their skills and their clothes. And then what are we doing? Like, what is a game that we're playing? Yes, there are some rules, but also there aren't. You can just, especially in this type of dancing that I do, you can switch from one dance to another dance in the middle of a song, which is not weird. People do this all the time. But what are we doing? It cannot be called in words, right? And it cannot be called in, and also, of course, not the whole part that you were making about having joy or regrets, like making a mistake and then for the whole evening feeling silly about doing a stupid thing while it's not necessary, all these things. So I really like this. And I do think this is, whether it's a bunch of if statements or whether it's grabbing these rules from millions of lines of text on the internet, I think ultimately the underlying sentiment is that there can be a formalization, that there can be a representation in the computer of whatever we do. And then, of course, if you look very carefully, they are never talking about dancing. Sam Altman explicitly talks about economically viable activities, which tasting soup might be this in certain contexts. But, petting your dog or doing a dance will never be economically viable. And yet we like these things very much.
Yes, indeed. Any more quotes?
So maybe one concept that he introduces that I really like. I hope I do it justice because I am not a psychologist or a philosopher. But one thing he talks about is the concept of fringe consciousness. And this is almost like not being concentrated. So he says, if you're an expert working on a problem, whatever it is, then on the edges of your consciousness are things that you can freely grab from. So you're not necessarily, if you're writing a piece of text, for example, or a piece of code, then you're not only concentrated on whatever's in front of you. You have all the knowledge that already exists in your brain. And then at one point, something might pop into consciousness. You might be writing something, you think I once read a book about this. And then you aren't explicitly searching for this knowledge, but because of the way your brain works or whatever. This is the way he describes that a lot of people solve problems, that they have all this knowledge and that it drifts in and out of consciousness and you can steer it a bit, but also it happens very often without explicit attention. Maybe this is what you said in the beginning of the episode about getting a good idea while in the shower. And maybe that would be an example of fringe consciousness, where you're not really thinking about it, but you're also not thinking about it. And I thought this was also a very nice concept where you might say, well, a computer might do things, but not these things. So these are also nice concepts to think of without necessarily coming to a conclusion whether or not AI can think, because I believe this is a meaningless question. In this, I agree with Turing, but just having this, okay, if fringe consciousness is a thing that people have, I'm willing to accept that. Then machines must have something like this, the same, or something that takes the same functions. You can ask where is the fringe consciousness then in the computer? And if it doesn't have this, then clearly it is something different than computers, than humans. What are the implications of this? So I think just having these concepts in my fringe consciousness now moving forward, I think that is more the value of this book.
Yes. So when in today's everyday life will this book pop into your consciousness?
Yeah, so mainly if I read AI news, which is every day, I think, then you are always thinking about what is the background of this.
Yes. And anything in the AI news recently where you are like, wish you had read this book?
I mean, there's recently Anthropic saying Claude has emotions. Like, okay, like what are emotions? What is the epistemological grounding on which you're saying this? I think, yeah, computer science in general might need this type of discussion. But we hinted at this before a bit. It goes so against the things they know, because the thing they know, or we know, I'm one of them, is just, I want to build a thing and I've built the thing. This is the thing. Whether or not it should exist. So I have a good Weizenbaum quote with this, which maybe at one point we should also discuss in an episode. He's, of course, the creator of the Elijah chatbots. And he wrote in 1972, "What is wrong, I think, is that we have permitted technological metaphors and technique itself to so thoroughly pervade our thought process that we have finally abdicated to technology the very duty to formulate questions. Where a simple man might ask, do we need these things? Technology asks, what electronic wizardry will make them safe? Where a simple man will ask, is it good? Technology asks, will it work?"
I will get this as a tattoo if you get the other one as a tattoo.
Weizenbaum, you mean?
Yes. Felienne, what's the homework this time?
So while this episode was happening, you participated in it live maybe, I was Googling and I found this paper, What Can Computers Do Now? This third wave of AI and Dreyfus. I did not read this paper, but I think this would be really, really nice homework. I'm curious what it says. I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading the book as homework. I think we've done some good parts and it is so outdated that some of it, as we talked about as well, it doesn't really make sense. But it might make sense, in addition to reading this paper, just indeed to write down for yourself. Are there things you think computers cannot do now? And are there things you think computers shouldn't do ever? I think those are very interesting questions. Questions to discuss maybe also for people that teach courses about AI, that could go early in a course about building AI. Like, are there things we simply don't want computers to ever do because we like them? There's this really, really nice comic, and we can put it in the show notes. Maybe people have seen it, where in this comic, an ice cream eating machine has been built. So this is the new Hagenbot. It eats your ice creams. And then this one person says, but I like eating ice cream. And then people say, stop stifling progress. I think that's a good question to ask. Like, what are the things genuinely like writing? I like writing. I don't understand people. I mean, I understand because the whole system around it, but people that say, oh, I use AI for writing, or I use AI to brainstorm ideas. I don't understand what that means. I have 137 ideas in my notepad. I don't need AI for more ideas. So there's just things that people like. I don't want computers to do them because I like doing them.
I will do this homework. You will also do part of the homework.
I will definitely read the paper, yes.
Excellent.
I will send you a text message this time. Hey Hanna, this is Felienne. As promised, I will do some homework this time. We were supposed to read the paper What Can Computers Do Now? Dreyfus Revisited for the Third Wave of AI by Turing and Schmidt from 2024. And I found this paper while we were recording the previous episode and I sort of assigned it unread. That was maybe a mistake. Maybe this will teach me to prepare a little bit better before saying things, because I don't think this is a very good paper, or At least it's not a useful paper, because it very much comes from this computer science perspective that we talk about all the time. And I don't think it really tries to understand what Dreyfus was doing. All the way at the end of the paper, this becomes quite clear when they write, "It becomes apparent why the work of Dreyfus, with its astonishing polarizing attack on AI as such, remains studied." So it sees Dreyfus as an attack. And I think from that perspective, you can't really write a very good or neutral or useful paper if what you're opposing is seen as attacking. So I don't think it's necessarily very useful, because it keeps stressing like, oh, but AI can do this and AI can do this. But can it? For example, one thing I think is very interesting when they talk about ethical reasoning, they cite other work. And then the example they pick for ethical reasoning is, can a self-driving car decide between hitting a person and hitting a pole or a lamppost or something? That is ethical reasoning from their perspective. Like, it's very mechanical, very concrete. Oh, it does this or it does this. Whereas, of course, ethical reasoning very often is about conflicting values. You want this and also this, right? You want freedom of speech in a democracy, but also you don't want hate. And it's very hard to have both of these things without a compromise. So this whole notion that ethics or moral reasoning can be calculated, can be computed, this is exactly the type of thing that Dreyfus was sort of, I don't want to say attacking, but critiquing is a way better word. And one other thing I did think was interesting in the paper, though I wouldn't recommend necessarily people reading it, that they say common sense, what Dreyfus always talks about, common sense lacks an official definition, making it extremely difficult to agree if it has been completed. And I think, yes, exactly, right? This is what Dreyfus was saying. This is something that isn't possible. And the way that these authors talk about it, they say, well, but it is possible. Look at all the progress we made. They can't seem to understand that there are some things that cannot really be computed to a certain extent. So it is a nice example, nice between air quotes, of the computer science way of thinking. And it also made me think of a quote by the philosopher Mary Midgley. Maybe one day we can read a book by her as well on an episode. And she writes in her book, What is Philosophy For? The word intelligence doesn't name a single measurable property like temperature or weight. It is a general term like useful or rare. And I think that is such a different way of looking at the world that these authors lack, but also computer science in more general lacks, that it isn't something to be captured, intelligence or common sense. We all know common sense when we see it. So this notion that there isn't a definition is really something different from the fact that we as people can or cannot recognize it. Some things, and this is, I think, the core of Dreyfus's work, that for me is still very true. There are things we can do without them being precisely defined.
Hi, Felienne. Thanks for the homework. I think I have to agree with you. I also did not find the paper particularly useful. But I don't want to go into bashing mode. So one quote I really liked from that paper was where they write, "Today's hybrid AI systems are close to demonstrating all the features shown by Dreyfus, but do so in an almost imposter-type way." So they say AI does all kinds of stuff now, but it does do this in an almost imposter way. And I would go further. I think these AI systems are imposters. They pretend to be human-like. They pretend to be intelligent. They pretend to be empathetic. They pretend to be understanding when they're not. And I think all of these AIs, they should have imposter syndrome. But they don't have it, and that's my point. They will never have bad feelings about being imposters. They will not lay awake at night thinking someone will find out they are only pretending. They don't have the struggles we academics have with imposter syndrome. It's quite ironic, I think. I wish we would not suffer from this imposter syndrome that much in academia, but then maybe if you use AI, to do your job and to maybe write your academic papers, then maybe you should feel some imposter syndrome. And maybe this imposter syndrome, a new kind of imposter syndrome, is warranted. So then you had this question for the homework where we had to think of things computers can't do now. And well, I'm not sure if computers can't do it. I think computers are still quite bad with dealing with mistakes in good ways. So, of course, yes, there are robots who learn from their mistakes, and there's all kinds of stuff where learning from mistakes is a thing. It's part of the game. That kind of learning is not what I mean. I mean, if I think of my own life, I probably make thousands of tiny mistakes every day, and usually they throw my day around in all kinds of unpredictable ways. For example, I might take the wrong turn and end up at a supermarket that I had never seen and buy some nice food there and then have a meal that I never had before. So all kinds of things happens because of tiny mistakes. And I don't think computers enjoy making mistakes in the same way. They can't really appreciate mistakes. They can't leverage. They can't make use of mistakes in this creative fashion where a mistake in the end is no mistake. So if you look at how a computer would fix taking a wrong turn, well, think of a GPS system. It will just tell you to turn around and fix your mistake. Or if you ignore it, it will just recalculate a route to the original destination. But it will not tell you, hey, you have never been here. That's cool. Look around. And do you remember the last time you were lost? What a weird feeling to feel lost. I will turn myself off now so you get to enjoy this feeling. No, the GPS will just recompile a new route and update and ask you to go where you wanted to go anyway. It's just so boring. And the haters will now, of course, explain to me that such a creative GPS system can be built that improvises or that reacts in a funny way to your mistakes. Yes, I know, and I see value in that. I see value in simulated intelligence and in simulated creativity, but I see the most value in it because it's different from human creativity and because it's different from human intelligence. So I'm not against it. I just don't want to conflate it. I don't want to say humans are the same as computers. Computers are the same as humans. They are not the same. And in their difference, I see the value. But yeah, to get back to the question, making mistakes in a good way, not what computers are good at, in my opinion. There was another question. You asked also about things computers should not do, independent of whether they can do it. And this is, of course, such a beautiful question. And it made me think of something that happened a few years ago at our university when ChatGPT was emerging, and where a colleague that doesn't work for us anymore used an LLM to write a laudatio for a student. And I was really shocked about this, very sad, and just felt this was so inappropriate and disrespectful towards the student. So I think writing laudatios, definitely a no-go. This does not mean that an AI should never be used to write text. So maybe a teacher wants to use AI to produce a text that shows common mistakes Germans make when they learn Dutch. I would say go ahead, have the AI write that text, use it in your teaching. Seems appropriate to me. So essentially, this comes down to context. There's not one thing AI should never do. It's contextual. And this reminds me a bit of the theory we have in privacy research. It's a theory by Helen Nissenbaum called contextual integrity. And in this theory, she basically explains that appropriate flow of information is contextual. So if you share, for example, a picture, it matters who is on the picture, who shares it, with whom they share it, and how they share it. We have norms about that. And in Nissenbaum's book, she explains that privacy violations occur when these norms are violated. And I think something similar is going on with the use of AI in computers. We have norms and values in our society, and using AI in some contexts will definitely violate these norms and values. It's already happening. And in some contexts, an AI-generated letter is fine, and in another context, it's highly inappropriate. And then the problem with this, of course, is that the AI is really bad at judging if its use is inappropriate. It will probably mostly do what you ask it to do. And we humans are also not great at this. To my big disappointments, humans seem to display rather bad judgment. in what use of AI is okay and what use of AI is problematic. But at least I think we humans, we might learn. I don't think AI will learn when its use is violating human values and norms. It might be prevented from some actions, just like ChatGPT refuses to generate pictures of poop. But to bring this back to Dreyfus, I think it will never have the common sense to really make good judgment calls. Talk to you soon. Bye.